Basic Education Minister Angie Motshekga has confirmed that yet another matric exam paper has been leaked. Now, this was a physics paper 2, which was written yesterday. A maths paper was leaked last week, as we know, and the Hawks are now investigating. Well, the Basic Education Department has promised to give updates on the cases as the processes unfold. Let's chat more about this now with education expert Mary Metcalfe. Mary, good morning, and thanks so much for your time. So, a second paper leaked. I mean, this is the last thing that these poor matriculants actually need after the year they've had. What are we reading into this? Someone out there desperate for money, somebody out there desperate to pass. Where's the problem?
Who can tell what motivates somebody to do something so undermining of the whole matric process, and particularly this year? Clearly, the benefit must be that the person is selling it for gain. But what we need to do is to understand how the process unfolds from here. And what is the responsibility of the DBE and Umalosi is to let the students write, as they already have, these 2 papers, maths and physical science. And then they need to be able to assess the extent of the leakage, to understand if this is undermining the integrity of the results of these papers on a scale which would warrant rewriting it. That means they need to gather lots of intelligence, and the public can play a very useful role here, as well as law enforcement agencies. If the leakage was of a narrow, small scope, a few schools, a narrow geographical area, then it would be those schools that rewrite. If there's concern about the integrity of the exam as a whole, then it might mean that the rewrite involves more learners. They don't need the stress and anxiety at the moment. So whoever is behind this is really doing so many people a disservice.
So, Mary, what would we be looking for in the results when it comes to these particular papers, so that we would be able, as you say, to identify, which regions, which schools, what will markers and examiners be actually pinpointing or actually looking for? What would be the telltale signs?
Well, we're fortunate that we have a quality assurance body for the senior certificate, which quality assures the DBE exam as well as other exams. They would be looking at patterns that are irregular, where schools perform surprisingly higher than perhaps their school-based assessments, out of sync with the rest of the results, out of sync with previous years. And that would help them focus their exploration and investigations. Fortunately, that all is led by experts in the process of marking. In the meantime, the law enforcement agencies and the public need to be reporting how extensive the leakage was. It doesn't help learners to get access to a paper a few hours before and to get inflated results, because you can't base the rest of your life on a lie. And
we heard the minister say that it's been a good couple of years, since we've actually experienced leakages of papers. She mentioned this when it came to the leaking of the maths paper, Mary. What do you think is happening this time around? And I know you said it's very difficult to sort of venture what the motivation was for something like this, but especially in a year like this, is it showing some level of desperation? Is it showing somebody taking advantage maybe of just, an already bad situation in education in terms of a pandemic year?
I think, like many crimes, it's linked to opportunity. Now, the processes of safeguarding the papers, in the whole process, from the times that they're set to the times that they're printed, that process is managed to be so secure. But there's always a human element. If somebody recognizes I have an opportunity to actually secrete into some part of my clothing or bags that I carry a paper, if they manage to do that, then the paper has leaked. The extent to which departments go in ensuring that this can't happen is, I think, incredibly impressive. I know that in Gauteng some years ago, they used to weigh the papers as they came off the printing machine, so they could tell with very fine calibration if one paper was missing. But there's so many points along the line where a paper can go missing that I think it's good that we get the best law enforcement agencies looking at this, trying to identify who's responsible.
And I think especially in a year like this, Mary, where we've had so much being done online, not just the learning, but possibly the entire sort of setting of exam papers process as well, and sending things back and forth, you know, to be checked and all of that. Who knows where in that process there was a breach. Now, just going back to what you said about who might be made to rewrite the paper depending on what is found in the marking, where things seem a little bit suspicious. What does this do to the rest of the process when it comes to things like tertiary education, the moving on for these? How do we make allowances for that if particular schools have to rewrite, and does it hold the entire process up? What happens in a case like that?
Well, firstly, Umalusi, the assurance body, always make sure as part of their processes that there is a backup paper in terms of some calamity. If they decide that the paper needs to be written by a smaller group or a larger group, that paper will be fast-tracked and distributed. The time frames are not certain yet. Umalusi and the DBE are still investigating. If you are a learner in an affected area who now did not cheat but has to rewrite, if the time frame means that you won't get your results ready for perhaps entry into the post-school education sector, I think that would be such a tragedy for that learner after already a difficult year. But I'm sure that Umalusi and DBE are aware of these time pressures, and they will move as quickly as they can so that learners are not further disadvantaged after this difficult year.
And what's the lesson here for the department, Mary? I mean, did you think that maybe they became too complacent, that they weren't, as the minister said, paper leaks for many, many years, and all of a sudden we find this happening? What do they take out of this? What is the takeaway from this after looking at what's happened? Barely a week apart, it seems. People are brazen out there.
Well, the first thing we don't know is whether or not it's the same source or if there's more than one person involved, so that will need to be dealt with. I'm confident that the department must be constantly looking to improve their systems. The systems are robust. There's been a breach. This is an opportunity for both Umalusi and the DBE to constantly refine the levels of security that they're using. The people who work in the exam section are completely absorbed always in the security of the process. But we have 9 provinces printing and distributing. The processes of setting the paper, the processes of printing the paper, the processes of distributing the paper so that they're there in time for the schools to receive them as the exams are written, involve thousands of people across the country. So the security investigation has a large task ahead of it. What helps is information. So when concerned students, concerned families say, we know that there has been access in our community, the more information that is available, the more thorough the investigations can be, and hopefully the identification of the culprit.
And how does something like this actually affect the final, or the credibility of the final matric pass rate for the year, Mary? How should we be looking at those numbers when they come out, or that number when it comes out, whenever it does happen now? I don't know what's going to happen with these investigations underway.
So the information that would cause an examining body like the DBE or a quality assurance body like Umalusi to start being very vigilant is firstly the knowledge that it's been leaked and the verification that it's been leaked, but there will also be information in the marking process itself that raises concerns. Why has this school, or why has a percentage of learners in the school suddenly been doing so much better, which is out of sync with how they were performing in the assessments that happen at school level? Why would the school suddenly improve a great deal? We need to trust our quality assurance body, Umalusi, that they will be vigilant in terms of making sure there's a rewrite where necessary, and that they will gauge the extent of the need for the rewrite.
So we shouldn't doubt our final matric pass rate then, Mary. That's what I'm getting at, the final matric pass rate. We shouldn't be sort of looking at it with a hint of doubt or cynicism.
And every learner needs to know that they had a fair chance of writing and that their result has credibility, and for the rest of their life they can say, I wrote in 2020, it was a difficult year, but what I achieved was fair and it is valid. It may not be I may not have performed as well as I would have hoped to, but my result is true. It's trustworthy. It's reliable.
Right, Mary Metcalfe, thank you so much for that. Let's wait and see what investigations and marking actually, what results that yields for us and what it actually shows.